On. Good afternoon and welcome to the Mayor's Commission for Citizens with Disabilities monthly meeting. We've just wrapped up our pre-meeting, so we're finishing up our papers and our notes here. But I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Thank you to those in the room, and thank you to our loyal viewers who might be watching this, watching our rebroadcast. I'm going to go over just a few housekeeping and general announcements, and then we are very excited to welcome a guest speaker today that we haven't heard from before, I think, on this commission. So we were excited to welcome you. The rebroadcasts of this meeting are at 7 p.m. each Tuesday evening on Cox Channel 18. And video of today's meeting can also be viewed at the Disabilities Commission website. You can go to cityofomaha.org, click on the mayor's office, then click on Disabilities Commission, and you can find this meeting there. So we always like to say to have a pen and paper ready in case you want to take notes. I am definitely a note taker, so I always have my pen and paper ready. We did have a quorum at the beginning of our pre-meeting, so we were able to approve our August meeting minutes. Our June meeting minutes will be approved by the November meeting, if not before. So I want to just take a minute to remind everyone the purpose of this commission. So above and beyond anything else, I think we all agree that the purpose of this commission is to promote the quality of life, accessibility, and equity in all aspects related to the City of Omaha on behalf of and in cooperation with the citizens of Omaha who experience disabilities. To that end, our commission will advise the mayor, city council, city department heads, and other City of Omaha personnel on issues of access, representation, employment, housing, and quality of life affecting city citizens with disabilities and their respective families. We serve as a resource for Omaha citizens with disabilities and their families to express concerns and resolutions regarding issues affecting them. I'm also excited to say that within the past year, we've been able to create a Facebook page, which is really pretty active. It is managed and monitored by a staff member from the Department of Human Rights and Relations. So we're excited to have that additional kind of promotion of our meetings, our guest speakers, and other disability issues that have arisen. We also serve as an advocate for accessibility issues and implement plans and projects to improve services for citizens with disabilities. And we review and implement plans and projects to advocate for those citizens with disabilities. So let me get back to my notes. I apologize. In our pre-meeting, we discussed there have been some staffing transitions in the Department of Human Rights and Relations, which is the department in which this commission lives. And I had the opportunity to meet with the director and assistant director a couple of weeks ago. We discussed a plan moving forward for how those positions that were restructured, how those positions will be filled, how that may or may not impact this commission, as well as the citizens of Omaha and their families who experience disabilities. So I think one of the biggest takeaways from that is that the Department of Human Rights and Relations is working hard to get a trained and certified ADA coordinator for the city. The process is not quick, and so I've asked this commission to be patient, and I'm also asking the department to keep us posted. And in the meantime, should there be any issues or complaints regarding the ADA, citizens can address those concerns to the Great Plains ADA, which can be contacted at gpadacenter.org. So that's G as in great, P as in plains, adacenter.org. You can also still contact the Department of Human Rights and Relations. They will take complaints and they will still work on investigations. But if there is something that specifically an ADA certified coordinator needs to address, they will do that. Anything else from the pre-meeting that we feel. Okay, so what we'll do is we will have our commissioners introduce themselves, the disability that they represent and or any professional affiliations they would like to share, and then we'll invite our guest speaker to begin her presentation. So we'll start over here on my right.
Hi, I'm Natalie Simmons, and I'm a grant writer with my company, Dotted Eye Writing Services, and I'm a mental health advocate.
And hi, my name is Ed Armstrong. I represent adults with severe physical disabilities, and I work at QLI, which is a brain and spinal cord injury rehabilitation centre in Omaha.
Sorry, we skipped Wendy. Hello, I'm Reverend Lisa Sherman. I'm the pastor at Faith Christian Church. I'm currently getting my doctorate in the theology of suffering and disability, and I also serve on the State of Nebraska Critical Incident Stress Management Team, the CISM team, that gets deployed. And then I am a mother of 5 beautiful special needs children.
Hello, my name is Pete Seiler, and I'm representing deaf and hard of hearing citizens, addressing their needs and communication access, effective communication, which is a large group estimated to be about 300,000, about 3,000 people in Omaha, and with different levels of hearing issues, hearing loss. Those that also work, I also work with individuals that are deaf and blind, along with the Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Floral, and I represent individuals that are visually impaired, blind and deafblind, and I work with the Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. We're the vocational rehabilitation agency serving visually impaired, blind, and deafblind.
And I realized that after my very long intro, I did not intro myself. I'm Wendy Hamilton, and I represent adults with autism spectrum disorder. I'm the adult child of a parent with autism, and so I often speak about Autism Society of Nebraska or other advocacy or awareness events that impact adults with autism. Two of our members that couldn't be here today, or our 2 members that couldn't be here, are Joel and Mark. And Mark is the one who invited our guest speaker to be here today. And her name is Leah, and she is the executive director of the Down Syndrome Alliance of the Midlands. And we're very happy to have you here because October is Down Syndrome Awareness Month, and so we're excited to learn about what your agency does. And I'll give you a spoiler alert. There are kind of 3 things that we'd like you to think about. I think this was in your email from Nancy. Obviously tell us about your age, from Natalie, sorry, wrong name. Tell us about your agency. Let us know about any concerns that your clients are facing and any recommendations of how Omaha can be a better city for your clients. So with that, welcome and take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate you guys inviting me. Are we good to go on here? Like you said, it's Down Syndrome Awareness Month.
I have to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. Reminder to please speak slowly as we are sign interpreting. I am a terrible culprit of this. I talk too fast, but I can remind other people to speak slower.
Absolutely. No, thank you for the reminder. Thank you.
Do we have the interpreter as well as the PowerPoint?
Oh. Will the interpreter show on the screen during the rebroadcast? It usually does. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we'll make sure, Dr. Seiler, that before it gets posted, that the interpreter box is there for rebroadcast.
Okay, so, but for now,
But
the public is not able to watch the interpreter.
It's not live.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Thanks. Sorry, Leah.
Okay,
Take
no,
two.
no problem, no problem. Thank you so much for inviting me. Like Wendy said, October is Down Syndrome Awareness Month, so we've been busy giving lots of presentations around the community, which has been great. I feel like we get more and more invitations every year that the word is getting out that it is Down Syndrome Awareness Month in October. So my name is Leah Janke, and I'm the Executive Director of the Down Syndrome Alliance of the Midlands. I always like to tell people a little bit about my story because I think it's interesting to hear you guys, kind of your connection to the disability community and how we all got here. So I have a degree in science that I didn't really do a whole lot with, and then I went back to school and got my teaching certificate, and I taught high school science for several years. And then I had 3 beautiful children, and my youngest of which has Down syndrome. So then I stayed home for a couple years when he was first born due to some, complex medical issues. And then I got really involved in the Down Syndrome Alliance of the Midlands and served on their board of directors, and then was hired to run their education programs. So I did that for a couple of years and then became the executive director almost 2 years ago. So that's kind of where I got to where I am today. My son with Down syndrome is 6 years old now and in first grade. So you'll see some pictures of him in the PowerPoint. So I'm going to go through and just talk a little bit about some of the programs that DSA has to offer, and then we'll talk some of, more about, take some questions and about some of the issues that we currently face. So our mission at the Down Syndrome Alliance is that we are committed to connecting those touched by Down syndrome through education, advocacy, and support. And we really mean that more than just our families. We want the whole community to know that we're here, Boy Scout troop leaders, teachers, nurses, if they're, working with somebody with Down syndrome, that we exist and they can reach out to us for help and support. On this picture, their shirts say, "I love homies" with extra chromies, which is always a popular one. This picture is from a calendar shoot that we do every year that we hand out as an advocacy piece to schools and medical professionals. So I know that speaking to you guys, you probably know about this, but for anybody that would watch the broadcast, I'm just going to tell you guys a little bit about Down syndrome. Down syndrome occurs when an individual has an extra copy of their 21st chromosome. So people who do not have Down syndrome have 46 chromosomes in each of their cells. People with Down syndrome have 47 chromosomes in all of their cells. It happens totally randomly. There's no way to prevent it or cure it after it's happened. There's nothing that causes it. It is just something that happens at conception. Down syndrome is the most commonly occurring genetic condition. We see about 30 new families every year and have about 1,300 families in Omaha who have somebody with Down syndrome. Down syndrome occurs in all races and economic levels, and this is kind of the last pieces where we really come in. Education programs and home environment and community supports have really helped to increase the way people with Down syndrome are thriving in our community. So a big part of what we do is medical outreach. We give presentations to grand rounds and nurses and genetic counselors, and we make sure that the hospitals have our information to give to new parents when they get the diagnosis that their child has Down syndrome. With more and more prenatal diagnosis happening, we have about 50% of our families get a prenatal diagnosis. We've really started to reach out to more OB offices and things like that. We have lots of families that reach out to us and start to attend our support groups and things like that while they're still pregnant. We've seen a big increase in that. The Parent to Parent program is a program that we partnered with Ali Webb Center to bring to our families. We had, I guess I'm not sure how many, several parents come. We tried to get a wide variety of people who had prenatal diagnosis, people who did not. We have a family who had adopted a child with Down syndrome. We have a Spanish-speaking mother. We have a couple of dads that participated, and then all different age ranges, so that when a new family does reach out to us, either for support or just looking to connect with somebody, that I'm not always their go-to person, because like I said, my son is 6, so I can't answer every question on puberty and job training and things like that. So we now have a trained group of parents that are kind of on the first call responder list. The Down Syndrome Education Series is one of our highlight programs. We've had several other Down syndrome organizations across the country kind of copy this program that we started. Instead of doing an all-day conference once a year, which is what we had done in the past, and just saw that it was not that well attended. It was hard for people to get childcare, costs involved, things like that. We now bring in a speaker that is a Down syndrome expert once a month on a Tuesday evening. Those are held at the UNO Community Engagement Center. They're open to anyone. You don't have to have a child with Down syndrome. You can be an educator. You could be a physical therapist, a grandparent. The topics range everywhere from potty training to legislative advocacy to special needs planning. We've been running that program since 2014, and it's been really well attended. So, another partnership that we have started with Ali Webb Center is Sib Shops. So that is a program for siblings of people with a disability, again, not just Down syndrome specific, any disability. And we run that at the same time as our Down syndrome education series, because we found that since we're already having 40 parents come, they might as well bring their children, and they're in a room across the hall. It's been a great program for siblings to feel like, there's something out there for them. All the adult facilitators of that program are siblings of somebody with a disability, so they really can relate to the kids, and for the most part it's just fun. We had to move them down the hall because they were so noisy. But they do kind of a fun activity, and then each month do talk about something related to having a sibling with disabilities. The Learning Program is another program that it's actually a national curriculum that we have partnered with. It started over in the UK, very research-based, and then the Orange County Foundation, Down Syndrome Foundation, first brought it to the United States, and there's now, I believe, 29 partner cities who run this program. It's pretty much based on an early intervention, literacy, and math skills. So we run that once a month. It's for kids ages 3 through 6, and we have a paid occupational therapist, speech therapist, and 2 special education teachers that run that program. So it's kind of a little mock preschool, and then in a separate room, the parents are learning different topics on how they can teach their children at home. Sight words, counting skills, best learning environment, things like that. Scholarships and stipends is something that we budget into our funds every year. We really want to be collaborative with other disability organizations and programs that are available in our community. So this is a picture from the I Can Bike Camp. We sponsor several kids to be part of that every year. We also have self-advocates that will apply for scholarships to attend a acting class, or wanting to take taekwondo for the first time and it doesn't quite fit into the family's budget, things like that. So extended hospital stay meal assistance gift cards was new this year. We did a survey with our parents and kind of asked, how are we hitting the mark, and where are we dropping the ball? What are some other ways that we can help you guys? We do have lots of families that, have kids that are in the hospital tonsils and heart surgery and all kinds of different complications that come along with Down syndrome. So if you're in the hospital for more than 48 hours, you can apply for a gift card. It's just a Visa gift card, so it's intended to use for meal assistance, but really could be used however the family best sees fit. So that's been a really popular program this year. Quarterly, we hold a DSA Parent Connection, and it's for any new families that haven't quite got connected with our organization yet, aren't sure what all we offer. It's mostly new parents. We do get prenatal families that attend, lots of new babies, but then being Omaha with great job opportunities and Offutt and things like that, we do get families that move here that have a 12-year-old that has Down syndrome, and so they'll come as well. And we have a parent panel. We give this similar PowerPoint where they can learn about all the options that we have for them. So. We have social events once a month out in the community. These pictures are from a dance class and our pool party. The dance class we did break up into different age groups. This was the little kids, but we had all the way up to adults that came and did the dance class, which was pretty cool. We really try to do things, bowling parties, things like that out in the community so that people are seeing that families who have a child with Down syndrome do the same things as everybody else does, and really just kind of showing that advocacy piece. So our support groups, we have several support groups. Our moms group is one of them. This is from one of those paint and sip type classes. We get together quarterly to do these types of events. We were making Down syndrome awareness door hangers, and then we also get together once a month just to talk about, all the things that entails to be a mom of somebody with Down syndrome. And that we found it's a lot of new moms' first event that they ever attend is our moms group. I think that people just seem most comfortable coming to that. We have a grandparents group. They throw several holiday events for us. They do an Easter egg hunt and a Meet Santa at the fire station and a trunk or treat that's coming up. The grandparents, we always get grandparents that reach out right away wanting to know how can I be involved now that I know that I'm going to have a grandchild with Down syndrome. So having the support group for them and giving them tasks to work on every year and events to plan has been really great. We have a dad's group. They meet at a bar once a month, but it's a great group. I presented for them before, so I got to sit in on a meeting, even though I'm not a dad, so I felt a little bit like a spy, but it was great. It's good for them to get to talk about those issues, in amongst their peers. So. This group was new this year, and this we'll get to kind of as one of our concerns in our organization, is that there doesn't seem to be as big of a support group for adults with Down syndrome, or I think probably any disability. Not only parents, but we get lots of phone calls or emails saying, my parents passed away, my brother lived in Minnesota, now he's coming to either live with me or now I'm his caregiver, and he lives in another state, and I haven't taken care of him or been around him since I was 16. Where do I fall in here? So this support group has been really great. They meet once a month and talk about how to be the caregiver for an adult with Down syndrome. And I do believe we have a couple other people that attend that do not have a child with Down syndrome. They have a different disability. Legislative advocacy is a big part of what we do. That's my son there with the red hair. So we were in Washington, D.C. last year for the Buddy Walk on Washington, which is something that the National Down Syndrome Society organizes every year. We meet with our local senators and representatives talking about current issues that affect people with disabilities. We also try to get down to Lincoln a few times a year. We work with the ARC and the Coalition for Strong Nebraska and other disability groups to be part of legislative advocacy. We started a legislative advocacy training committee this year as well, because we found it's kind of the same group of parents that that does it every time. And I think, one, they're just a little intimidated to make those phone calls, go to Lincoln, or even when, the legislators are here in Omaha. So we did a parent or caregiver training kind of on how to call, how to write an email, what you say when you're there, kind of did some mock scenarios. And then we also had a self-advocacy training. We're actually still in the session of that because it's a 3-part series. So we've had the first 2 trainings, and that went really well. You can see here we've got one of our young men with Down syndrome. He was practicing testifying and had written out a whole story, like a self-advocate story about why his was about why he wanted to live independently and the supports that he would need to make that happen. So we hired a young man with Down syndrome to work in our office last August, and that's been really great. We are a work-from-home organization for a long time. We recently moved into the community engagement building at UNO, and so having our own office space has allowed us to hire a self-advocate. So he works in our office on Wednesdays, and it's been really great. He has a job coach from Ollie Webb that has, really helped build some of the, computer skills and things like that for Marcus. So. Education outreach is another, we've been really busy with that this month, being Down Syndrome Awareness Month. So we go into schools and give presentations. Our slogan is kind of the more alike than different. That's our campaign that we do. We've got a whole presentation. It's been really well received. And this one, our self-advocate with Down syndrome attended with us. He is an author of a book, so he read the book this was at Millard. But yeah, so that's been a really good. Sometimes we have educators that invite us. Other times we have parents who say, hey, it'd be great if you would come talk to my child's class. World Down Syndrome Day is celebrated every year on March 21st. We do a big party for our families. This year we're going to expand that and make it more of a community party so that families can invite their neighbors and their educators and not just necessarily for our family, so we can really build on that advocacy piece. We delivered donuts for Down syndrome around town to local news stations and got a lot of really good press about it, and then some of our big sponsors and things like that. Rock Your Socks for Down Syndrome Day is kind of a nationwide, actually I think worldwide, campaign that's picked up, and it's kind of the different is cool idea, so to wear kind of crazy socks and say that it's cool to be different. The Step Up for Down Syndrome Walk and Family Festival is our biggest fundraiser, our biggest awareness piece. It was formerly known as the Buddy Walk, so you may have, this was the first year with the name change, and that was just, the funds are all kept local as a Step Up Walk. So it's kind of been Kansas City does a Step Up Walk and Denver does a Step Up Walk. So we had a great turnout this year. It was just a couple weekends ago. We had over 2,000 people that came. We met our fundraising goals. It was really great. So our next coming up fundraiser is we're holding a gala for the first time, and we are doing that in partnership with the Global Down Syndrome Foundation out of Denver, who really does the medical research piece on Down syndrome. So a percentage of our profits will go to them to assist in the medical research. We're currently in the works with our development committee to try to get our own facility. The REACH Center, Raising Expectations and Creating Hope is what it will be called. So we're really just looking for a space where we can expand our programs and not run everything out of a church basement or community center that lets us rent it out. So that's kind of our long-term goal at the moment. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is the portion where we grill you. No,
Sure,
just kidding.
absolutely. I'm ready.
That was wonderful. Thank you. I always have a million questions,
Sure,
so I'm going to
absolutely.
defer and let somebody else wants to start.
I have a question.
Sure.
Are you in a need for establishing maybe satellite locations around the city of Omaha for running some of these programs or support groups?
Yes, that would be great. We're actually currently in the works to set up a Spanish-speaking support group because that is somewhere that we lack with outreach. We do, like I said, have a parent. We have a go-to, she's our medical outreach, but we don't have an established support group there. And then we do partner with other disability communities. The Autism Center of Nebraska will let us use their space for things like that.
And if somebody is interested, whether it be a church or another community organization, would they just contact you or contact your agency and say we'd be interested in hosting?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That would be fantastic. Yes.
So is Down Syndrome Alliance of the Midlands a local affiliate of a national organization, or are you your own entity?
We're our own entity.
Okay.
So really our only affiliation before was with the National Down Syndrome Society because of our buddy walk. So when you do a buddy walk, you give a percentage of your proceeds back to the National Down Syndrome Society. So we do have lots of, affiliations, but kind of on our own, however we choose to support other organizations. We're not affiliated.
What's your geographic coverage? How do you define Midlands?
Sure. So it gets a little, confusing with the Omaha Metro. So Lincoln actually has 2 Down syndrome organizations. We partner with them a lot. Their members come to our events and vice versa. And then there is Southwest Iowa has like a small group. I don't know a ton about them, except for that I know they do an awareness walk. I haven't really heard a lot about programs that they offer. So we go into Iowa. We just had a new mom that reached out who lives in Trainer, Iowa. And then there are no other organizations in the whole state of Nebraska besides the 2 in Lincoln. So we do get from all over the state of Nebraska, depending how far west we are. Not that we definitely won't support them or give them any resources, but I am, closely related to the Down Syndrome Association in Denver, and a lot of times we connect them with them because that's usually the closest children's hospital for them versus coming to Omaha. So we've got a lot of Western Omaha families that go to Denver Children's Hospital.
And so you are a nonprofit organization, right?
Correct.
So what is your tell us a little bit about your capacity. How many people are on staff? It sounds like you have a ton of volunteers, which is,
Sure.
I'm sure, critical.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm the only full-time staff member.
Okay.
It's the way nonprofit world works. I have a part-time employee who helps plan our walk and our gala and our special events. And then we have Marcus, who works in our office part-time. That's our self-advocate employee. And then I have contract staff that will help run some of our programs. So our learning program, we have contract staff. We contract with Ollie Webb for their, SIB shops, employees that run that program. Sorry, I missed that. Was there a second part to that question? That was it. Okay.
Serve throughout the year?
Sure. So we have about 400 active families.
Okay.
So we've got a database that's much larger than that, but we have about 400 active families.
And then how are you funded?
We are mostly funded from our walk. We do have, I'm also our grant writer, but we have been pretty lucky to receive some major grants every year. We've got some private donors, and then we are just now tapping into the foundation world. So hoping that will continue to benefit us.
That's great.
But I'm assuming you don't charge for, or do you charge for any of the programs?
No, we don't charge for our memberships. Our learning program we do charge for. They get a set of 20 books that they take home, and we have to buy that national curriculum and things like that. But that's one of the things we also offer scholarships for. So I think this year 3 of our 12 families are participating on scholarship. But all the rest of our programs and events are free.
On your education series and the training, on your website, would an individual be able to go and see like a list of topics so
Yes.
that they would know maybe which month would be more ideal for them?
Yes. Yep, so we do have a drop-down menu on our website. It's under the Resources tab. It says Down Syndrome Education Series, and there's a list of all of them, plus past ones. All the way back to 2014, you can see all the handouts, and then we just started video recording within like the last year and upload them to YouTube. And a lot of that was because of our families from like Western Nebraska that would reach out and say, I would love to come to this presentation, but I live, 3.5 hours away. So when the speaker allows, every once in a while, we do have a speaker that, prefers to not be videoed. But when the speaker allows it, we now record them and then put them onto our YouTube channel. So you can go back and see all of the past presentations as well.
Yes, a comment that you made earlier, you mentioned that you had people that work throughout the state of Nebraska. And most of your clients come from Omaha and Lincoln, or are they scattered around the state?
Most of our clients are in the Omaha metro area, but we do have members all over the state, correct?
I always ask that kind of question because it's the same with deaf and hard of hearing individuals. Sometimes they also have other disabilities. Sometimes they are deaf and blind, sometimes they're deaf and Down syndrome. Have you confronted or have you been faced with any of those deaf individuals or people with hearing problems that also have Down syndrome?
We have, yes. So we have had interpreters at our Down Syndrome Education Series. Whenever anybody requests to have an interpreter, we do have them. We do have several individuals in our group who are either hard of hearing or deaf. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that work that you're doing. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Did you have a question? Did you have a question? So this might dovetail well into what Dr. Seiler was asking. You mentioned with reference to your own son, and I think it was in one of the slide about extended care, I think, that there are often additional complications with Down syndrome. And I know you're not a doctor, and I always say I'm not an expert on autism. I'm an expert on my family's autism. So I'm just wondering if you don't mind, if you can share with us maybe some of the more common complications, or even, some things that your son has triumphed over or struggles with.
Absolutely. So I like to warn new families that I feel like the first year of life is usually pretty medically complex for most kids with Down syndrome, even kids that are considered, healthy. 50% of kids with Down syndrome have a heart defect. That's how a lot of the I had a prenatal diagnosis. That's how my prenatal diagnosis was found, because my son had a heart defect. So when we were in for our 20-week ultrasound, they found the heart defect. And once they see those, because they know that it's a big marker for Down syndrome and other genetic conditions, I think they look a little closer for some other markers for Down syndrome. So 50% of our families do have heart surgery. Luckily, we are living in an age where medical technology is fantastic. Children's is fantastic. My son was in the hospital for 7 days, and he was 6 weeks old when he had heart surgery, which is just crazy, that they go home so quickly. Other complications are vision. Lots of our kids have glasses. My son wears glasses. He also just had a corrective eye surgery, not LASIK, not elective. It was to correct his kind of shaky eye, if you will. Tubes are very common in our kids with Down syndrome.
Hearing tubes?
Yes, hearing tubes. Yep. So they have really small ear canals, and nasal passages. So it just kind of leads to sinus complications, more likely to have ear infections, and even not necessarily if they're not having ear infections, they get fluid buildup behind their ears, and so they fail hearing tests. So most ENTs will just recommend that they put tubes in so that that fluid is not, staying behind their ears. Several of our kids do have feeding tubes. Again, usually only that first year of life. The failure to thrive can be an issue just with the low muscle tone in the mouths of, well, all over the bodies of people with Down syndrome, but including in their mouth. Sometimes the whole sucking reflex is just not great for them, and so they end up with a feeding tube. Again, normally that's something that most kids with Down syndrome outgrow. Sleep apnea is a huge problem with people with Down syndrome, so it's recommended by the Board of Pediatrics that every child with Down syndrome have a sleep study by the age of 4, and lots of our kids have them before then just because of signs that parents see, really restless sleeping, waking up more times in the night than normal, things like that. Following sleep apnea, some kids then are on supplemental oxygen when they sleep, and then lots of kids with Down syndrome end up having their tonsils removed because that can kind of help open up the airways. Feeding therapy can be another one, so lots of therapies, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and then feeding therapy is something I had never even heard about until I had a child with Down syndrome, but again, kind of working on that low muscle tone in their mouths.
And your son is in first grade?
He is.
And
yeah.
How's he doing in school?
He is doing fantastic. We've been really lucky, and he, he's included in the regular classroom. He was in kindergarten as well and in first grade, and, he does work with, he has 2 different special education teachers that he works with. They come into the classroom to work with him, and then he does have a small amount of time that he's taken out into a resource room to work on things like reading and math. But yes, he's doing great. He loves, hanging out with his peers, and he gets invited to birthday parties. And I just put a video on Facebook a couple days ago of him reading like an early reader book, and he's reading on grade level, which is fantastic. So, yeah.
So, do you have any suggestions or any observations that you've had of how Omaha can be, a better provide a better quality of life for you, your son, the clients that you serve, anything like that?
Sure. I think right now our biggest struggle is that adult piece, which I know that is across the way with all disability groups. We hear from so many of our families that high school was fantastic. They were voted homecoming king, and they had friends, and they were busy on the weekends. And then all of a sudden, all those peers go off to college, and they're at home with their parents with nothing to do. And the depression rate, rises. They miss hanging out with peers. They're not working like their friends are. They're not going to college like their friends are. I think the social activities become a little less when you're outside of high school. So that piece, working on how people with disabilities can be employed in Omaha. I do know, working on the UNO campus, that they do have a pilot program right now that they just started for people with disabilities to attend UNO. They are auditing. They have one student right now who is kind of, testing the waters, and he's auditing his classes, but he's attending, I'm not sure if it's part-time or full-time. And then next year, the hope is that he'll live on campus, and they'll expand it to a couple more students.
Is he a student with Down syndrome? Or
I believe he has autism.
Just
he
curious.
definitely does not have Down syndrome,
Okay.
but I believe he has autism. And then we recently had a meeting with Dr. Mirnix from the Monroe Meyer Institute, and I know that they are working on a similar type program at Metro, which would be fantastic. So I think just that whole transition piece into how we make our community more available for adults with disabilities is a huge concern.
I was just going to add, I know that your concern about young adults as they're moving in and leaving high school.
Right.
You know, that's a real focus for vocational rehabilitation, to be focusing on that 14 to 21-year-olds so that as they're exiting school, that they are really having a chance to experience employment.
Sure.
So is there any kind of dialogue with vocational rehabilitation, you know, with your parents?
Yep, there is,
Good.
and I guess I should maybe go back and say, I think it's maybe once they get out of the transition program.
Right.
I think it's
It
maybe not
is.
so bad until 21,
It
and then
is.
21 is where it gets a little harder. Because I do think the transition piece, you know, Omaha disability groups have done a great job of making that, you know, accessible to our families. And I know we have a couple people that do Project Search and,
Yes.
you know, have jobs that they really like in that transition program. I think it's just the after that
It
piece.
is, yeah.
Right.
Things kind of fall off once you turn
Right.
21. But then I know that then on a kind of a national level, there's kind of a concern about sheltered employment and students,
Absolutely.
you know, exiting school into sheltered employment.
Right.
And even maybe the future for sheltered employment.
Right.
So hopefully more of these young people can be having integrated employment
Right,
in the
absolutely.
community.
Working a job that they choose to have. Right.
Yes, so talking about voc rehab, and after they become 21 and older, what kind of employment do these people typically work in? Most of my experience at school is that we would give them some training, like assembly line type of training, and some higher, some data collection that we found. Have you find what works best for these when they become older? What kind of employment is best for them? That qualitative research?
Sure. Well, I think it's a little bit all over the board depending on the abilities of each individual. I do know that there are several places in Omaha that do employ, I know people with Down syndrome just because, you know, I'll be at Marcus Theaters and I will see somebody behind the counter who has Down syndrome. And so, you know, it stands out to me in my personal life. Several grocery stores around town do have employees with different disabilities that they are paying at, you know, the same rate as they're paying their other employees. Same thing with Marcus Theaters. I know the Omaha Storm Chasers have some employees with disabilities. I think that's one of those. All of those actually, I think, are great examples of the different levels of what you could do in those places. You could be doing everything from stocking the concession stands to the person actually, you know, working and taking your order and taking the money and things like that. So it just really depends on the level of ability for that person. But I think the goal is just that they're having a job that they actually enjoy and you know, applied for and really wanted to have, and not working on an assembly line or something that's maybe just more like a babysitter than it is equal employment.
I have a question.
Sure.
How is there any opportunity for state assistance once they reach 19? Like I have a son on the DD waiver, the developmental and disability waiver, and mainly that assistance kicks in for that adulthood instead of offering services when they're under 18.
Right.
Are there opportunities for that, and how do you let your families, how does the word get out about that, especially people that are new to Nebraska and may not be aware of them?
So yes, there is state funding available for individuals with Down syndrome once they become adults. People with Down syndrome do not qualify for SSI and Medicaid under as minors unless they qualify either under the aged and disabled waiver, so they have to have that nursing level of care, or you know, financially qualify. So I will say most of our families who have children do not get any sort of government assistance until they're adults. But yes, then they do qualify for Medicaid and services and things like that as adults. when we talked about the parent-to-parent group, we do have a couple of parents on our group who, have gone through that. They know when to apply, they know how to apply, they know when you need to get kind of that whole ball rolling. So we do really try to encourage our parents to, be on that kind of transition checklist of where you're at and when you need to, make sure you have your ducks in a row for that.
Because what's surprising to me is the wait lists are so long here in Nebraska for housing.
Right.
So
7 years, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're planning that and you wait until age 17,
Right.
You got to start way back, like
Right.
age 10,
Absolutely.
to start all that paperwork.
Right.
It's possible to apply early. You can't necessarily receive services
Right.
until 21.
Right.
But it's really, really important that you apply prior to your 21st birthday.
Yes.
Yes.
But if you're really interested in the housing, to try to get, apply for service coordination sooner.
Absolutely. And we do encourage most of our families, or all of our families, I should say, to get on, and I'm going to forget the technical term because we all just refer to it as the list, to call and get on the list, because we've met with DHHS before, and they've talked about how important it is that they need to know the numbers that are coming up. So for us to call now and say, my son is 6 and he has Down syndrome, and you give their social security number and their birthday, and they get on this list so that they can prepare when they're trying to, do their budget and things like that, of how many kids they have coming up that are going to qualify for services, down the road. So.
Dr. Seiler, did you have something else to say? I'm sorry.
Yes, and I did want to add, we recently had the Association of the Deaf Conference, and there are many topics about employments were discussed. And the fact is that nationwide, it's estimated that 50% of deaf individuals can't have a job. And that matches their education, training level, and so on. They're not employed that way. So that means some of that's discrimination, some of it's just ignorance.
Absolutely.
And yet people brag about low unemployment rates, but they really are not looking at people with disabilities. So do you encounter that kind of high frustration, I guess I would say, in this area around the country?
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think when they come up with that low employment rate, they are not including people with disabilities. I think that, people that are deaf or hard of hearing is a great example. I think a lot of people with Down syndrome who are nonverbal or just have really poor, speech skills kind of have the same thing. It's not, it doesn't really portray their capabilities, but it really hinders their, their opportunities in life sometimes.
I guess we're all sharing the same problems.
Absolutely.
One other thing I wanted to say before we close was a couple of years ago, I was at a presentation at the Douglas County Health Center, and this was maybe 3 years ago, and they said that they are preparing for, and I would assume that now are implementing services for aging adults with Down syndrome. And I thought that was, pretty progressive, and I was happy to hear it. And I said, that's great news, keep going in the right direction. And I had asked a question about if they were also preparing to serve aging adults with autism. And they said that they don't expect that to be an issue for 30 years. And so what I had said was, well, there are people now who are adults who are aging with autism who need services now. So I think it kind of goes back to what we're all saying here is, whether you've got 7 years in advance you need to apply for something or you don't. I think that it's, this is all good movement and resources and support, and no hate on Douglas County Health Center. That was a true conversation that happened.
Right.
But thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of your son and other families affected by Down syndrome, and thank you for spending some time with us here today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having
If
me.
somebody wants to contact you or reach out to your agency, what is the best way to do that? And if you could say it very slowly so our sign interpreter can catch it.
Sure. So our website is DSAMIDLANDS.org. So it's dsamidlands.org. And that would be the best way on there. My email's on there. There's just a general info tab. We also have a Facebook page, which is the Down Syndrome Alliance of the Midlands, it's pretty active, age of social media, so.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet. In the next few minutes, we'll just wrap up, and we'll have all of the commissioners give them an opportunity to share if they have announcements, events, anything else they want to share. And again, we'll start with Natalie.
I just want to thank you, and I don't have any announcements for this time.
Thank you.
Yes, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I discovered a website that I was excited about. I work for QLI as the adaptive sports specialist, and I found a website called abovelimits.org, and it details places around the country that have adaptive sports offerings for people with disabilities. So I encourage people to check that out. There's lots of accessible recreational activities in Omaha. So I think as we see those, we can contact that website and we can add those to the list. And if you're traveling around the country, then you can get on there and check out the map and see what opportunities exist.
Very cool.
I just want to thank you for everything that you do and the heart of a mom. And so thank you. And I also want to give a huge shout out. I think sometimes we forget, especially families with disabilities, huge shout out to emergency responders. Because I don't know if your family is like my family, but kind of what keeps us upright and going is our neighborhood EMTs and emergency rooms and people that can handle crises when you don't know what to do. So I just want to give them a huge shout out for what they do to help us keep our family going.
Yes, I already complimented you in the work you were doing. I just think it's awesome work, and really what all of us do and what you do for us. But I did want to share that recently we had Purple Tie Gala, and that was a fundraiser for the Heartland, domestic violence, and sexual assault for individuals deaf and hard of hearing victims. That gala was just it was a wonderful group of people. They came in purple shirts and beautiful dresses, purple everything. And we raised a good amount of money to help individuals that are deaf and hard of hearing, both female and male actually, who encounter abuse from different ways. And so it was nice to see that being instigated and that people taking control of their lives now. It's wonderful to see that.
And I don't really have anything, but I want to thank Leah for her presentation because it's pretty amazing what you're doing, the number of services that you're providing. So thank you.
And I thank you again for being here. I want to thank our interpreter, Jamie. Thank you so much for your fast fingers. I want to thank Ronald for helping us with technology, and we are going to make sure that when this rebroadcasts that the sign interpreter box is in the window. Kat's going to look into that for us. And the only announcements I have on behalf of the Autism Society of Nebraska is that there will be a one-day sort of networking forum for service providers, so OTs, PTs, I think dentists, and maybe primary care physicians. It will be, I think it's going to be at the Autism Center of Nebraska and I think it's in December. I'm doing a really great job here of this announcement, but I would refer you to the website, which is autismnebraska.org. And with that, unless I have forgotten, our next meeting will be on Monday, November 26th. And again, rebroadcast of this meeting will be on Cox Channel 18, Tuesdays at 7. So, Leah, if you want to grab the family and watch some riveting television. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody.